There is something quietly magnificent about a person who stops chasing what refuses to see them. You see, we live in a society where attention is currency and silence is feared. We are trained even to equate our worth with how much noise we can make in someone else's world. But what if I told you that your power begins the moment you stop begging for acknowledgement? Let us begin with this fundamental truth. You were never meant to be an extra in someone else's story. You are the author, the pen, the paper, the whole damn book. And yet, when someone ignores you, whether it's a lover, a friend, or the world itself, you begin to shrink, to question, to doubt. But why? Because you forgot that the sun does not beg the blind to admire its light. This is why you must teach him, not by raising your voice, but by raising your vibration, not through spite, but through stillness, not with vengeance, but with vanishing. Let him feel the absence of your presence like the silence after a symphony. Let him taste the hollowness where your laughter used to echo, not because you're bitter, but because you're better without begging. You must understand this ignoring is not power. Often it is fear dressed in indifference. When someone ignores you, it does not mean you are invisible. It means they are blind to brilliance. And blindness, my friend, is not your burden to cure. The great paradox is this: the more you try to be seen, the less they see you. But the moment you retreat, not in anger, but in awareness, the entire universe starts whispering your name into their silence. So why watch this speech? Because perhaps today, you're not just seeking wisdom, you're seeking freedom. Freedom from the ache of being unseen. Freedom from the cycle of proving your worth. Freedom to walk away with peace rather than pain. And if you stay, you will learn not how to make someone notice you, but how to become so whole within yourself that their ignorance becomes irrelevant. Because in the end, the loudest lesson you can teach is to become the presence they cannot ignore by first becoming the soul that doesn't need to be seen. There's a profound difference between being seen as a choice and recognizing yourself as a force of nature. Most people spend their lives orbiting around others, hoping to be chosen, validated, or finally acknowledged. But this desperate yearning to be someone's yes is born from the illusion that our value is conditional, that we are only as important as the attention we receive. And that illusion is a heavy mask, one you were never meant to wear. You are not a convenience, not a placeholder, not something someone gets around to when their life is less chaotic. You are not an option. You are the infinite, unbound, whole, and utterly irreplaceable. To be infinite means to hold within yourself the full expression of presence, awareness, and energy. It is to know that you are not waiting to be completed. You are simply waiting to remember who you are. But when someone ignores you, when they turn their face from your light, it is easy to fall into doubt, to internalize the rejection, to shrink. Yet their blindness has nothing to do with your brilliance. Just as clouds can cover the sun but never diminish its fire, so too can ignorance obscure appreciation but never reduce your worth. Most people are not rejecting you, they are rejecting the version of you that threatens their comfort, challenges their smallness, or reminds them of what they're not ready to see. It is not your job to edit yourself into someone's limited perception. It is your calling to expand into the full dimension of your being, with or without their recognition. To truly teach someone the price of ignoring you is not to retaliate with bitterness, but to rise with awareness, to stop explaining your soul to those committed to misunderstanding it. When you reclaim your sense of self beyond the context of others, you become untouchable, not hardened, not cold, but sovereign. The moon never apologizes for pulling the tides. The ocean never dims itself because someone brought a shallow cup. You are not here to be an accessory to someone else's emptiness. You are the source, and those who fail to recognize it are not meant to define it. Rejection is perhaps one of the most painful illusions we experience as human beings, and yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. We carry it like a wound, believing it confirms our deepest fear that we are not enough. When someone ignores us, leaves us, or fails to see us, we take it personally. We interpret their absence as evidence that something within us is lacking. But in truth, rejection says far more about the perceiver than the perceived. What you call rejection is often someone else's inability to meet you where you are emotionally, spiritually, energetically. Their silence is not a statement about your worth. It is a mirror reflecting their limitations. We suffer because we think rejection is about us, but it's not. It's about timing, fear, ego, unhealed wounds, and often blindness. Imagine handing someone a priceless piece of art, and they toss it aside because they can't understand it. Does that devalue you, the art, or simply reveal the smallness of the one holding it? When you internalize rejection, you begin to forget your own brilliance. You start seeking ways to prove your worth, twisting yourself to fit into places and people that were never meant for you. This is the trap, thinking that being chosen makes you valuable, but you were valuable before anyone noticed. And you remain valuable even if no one ever does. So when he ignores you, remember he is not rejecting you. He is rejecting the opportunity to witness something sacred, something whole, something alive. You do not need to convince him of your light. Your light is not negotiable. Rejection only stings when we believe it confirms the lies we've told ourselves, that we must earn love, that we are incomplete alone, that being overlooked means being unworthy. But what if instead rejection was redirection away from the shadows of those who cannot see, and back into the center of your own being? You do not have to prove yourself to anyone who cannot perceive your depth. The pain of rejection is temporary, but the illusion that causes it can last a lifetime unless you wake up. Wake up to the truth that your value is not validated through others. It is realized by remembering who you are. In a world addicted to noise, reaction, and validation, there is something incredibly powerful, even revolutionary, about choosing silence. We have been conditioned to believe that the more we speak, defend, explain, or beg for recognition, the more likely we are to be seen or heard. But real presence doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it simply is calm, still, undeniable. When someone ignores you, the instinct is to fill the void, to make noise, to prove your relevance. But the deepest truth is this: your unbothered presence is louder than any plea for attention. Silence, when it comes from awareness rather than suppression, is not emptiness, it is depth. It is space, and in that space everything becomes clear. People begin to hear what your words could never articulate. They begin to feel the void left by your energy, your laughter, your attention. You are not being passive by withdrawing your focus, you are being intentional. You are no longer willing to hand your presence to someone who doesn't know how to honor it. And that is not pride, that is power. The paradox is beautiful. The more you pull back with peace, the more your absence begins to echo. The more you choose presence over performance, the more you become magnetic. Not because you are manipulating, but because you are vibrating at a frequency that no longer tolerates being diminished. People start to feel your absence like a missing frequency in their song. The silence grows loud, not with bitterness, but with awareness. And that awareness is a mirror one they can no longer avoid. We often think our words are what make people understand, but it is often our quiet detachment, our calm refusal to beg, that teaches the deepest lessons. When you no longer react, you shift the dynamic. You are no longer saying, "Notice me," you are saying, "I see me," and that changes everything. You stop becoming someone trying to win a place in another's story and instead become the author of your own. The beauty of presence is that it cannot be ignored forever. It is felt even in silence. It is missed even in distance. And when you stop trying to be heard, that is precisely when they begin to listen. Detachment is not the absence of care. It is the presence of clarity. When someone ignores you, your first impulse may be to hold tighter, to prove your worth, to remind them of your presence, to resist the unraveling. But clinging only deepens the wound. What we must understand is that detachment isn't a sign of weakness or indifference. It is the conscious decision to no longer tie your identity to the shifting winds of someone else's attention. It is a sacred reclamation of your own power. We lose ourselves not in the rejection itself, but in the attachment to outcomes we can't control. We spiral because we've anchored our peace to how someone else responds to us. But what if the true act of strength is not fighting to stay in someone's orbit, but choosing to stand still in your own? Detachment allows you to observe without absorbing, to feel without drowning, to love without losing yourself in the process. And when someone ignores you, detachment becomes your quiet revolution the moment you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. It's important to know that detachment is not coldness. It's not the absence of emotion. On the contrary, it is the ability to feel everything and still choose yourself. You can love someone deeply and still detach from their disregard. You can mourn the connection and still walk away with grace. Detachment is the moment when you stop negotiating your worth for scraps of attention. It's the inner shift that says, "I deserve more than this silence." When you detach, you stop giving them the power to dictate your emotional weather. You no longer crumble at the lack of response or the late reply or the subtle indifference. Instead, you rise not because they finally turned around, but because you no longer needed them to. And that is the moment they begin to feel the absence, not just of your presence, but of your energy, your care, your essence. Because nothing haunts the ignorant more than the peace of the one they overlooked. When you detach, you become light, and light does not chase shadows. It simply shines, and those who once turned away will either awaken to what they lost or be left in the dark, wondering how they let it slip away. When someone ignores you, your first thought might be, "What's wrong with me?" But this question stems from a deeply rooted illusion, the belief that how people treat you defines who you are. In reality, how people respond to you reveals far more about them than it ever will about you. This is the essence of the mirror principle. We are all mirrors, reflecting each other's capacity for perception, love, and presence. And when someone chooses not to see you, it is not a reflection of your invisibility, it is a reflection of their blindness. People can only meet you at the depth to which they've met themselves. If someone is emotionally shallow, spiritually fragmented, or burdened by their own unhealed wounds, they will not be able to recognize your depth no matter how brightly you shine. Your love, your attention, your presence might even become threatening to them. Why? Because your wholeness reminds them of their fragmentation. Your clarity reflects their confusion. Your openness reveals their fear. You are not being rejected, you are simply mirroring what they are not yet ready to face within themselves. This is why taking their silence personally is a form of self-abandonment. It is surrendering your truth in exchange for their inability to see it. But you are not responsible for someone else's reflection. You are not here to contort yourself into something digestible for someone else's limited understanding. The more you try to shrink, to dim, to soften your edges for their comfort, the more disconnected you become from your essence. What you must remember is that mirrors are not meant to explain, they simply reveal. When someone ignores you, let it reveal their limits, not your lack. Let it remind you that being unseen by someone does not mean you are unworthy, it only means their vision cannot hold your magnitude. And you were never meant to fit into the frame of someone who refuses to look. The mirror principle is a quiet liberation. It frees you from the illusion that you must constantly prove, perform, or persuade. It invites you to stand firm in your truth, knowing that the right eyes will never need convincing. They will recognize your reflection, not as a distortion, but as a revelation. There is a mysterious rhythm to the universe, a kind of spiritual physics where what we give, withdraw, or allow always circles back, often with amplified force. This is the nature of the cosmic boomerang. When you pull your energy away from someone who has taken it for granted, the absence doesn't vanish, it echoes. It doesn't just disappear into silence, it reverberates, grows louder, and returns, often when they least expect it. The person who once ignored your presence will one day sit in the hollow space your absence carved, wondering why the air suddenly feels colder. This is not karma in a punitive sense. It's not about revenge or wishing suffering on someone who overlooked you. It's simply the natural unfolding of energy. Everything we put into the world, love, time, presence, care, is a gift. And when someone refuses that gift, when they toss it aside casually, the universe does not punish, it balances. It rearranges the path so that the one who ignored must eventually face the very thing they dismissed. Your value becomes a weight they can no longer escape, not because you imposed it, but because truth cannot stay buried forever. And here's the deeper truth: the more authentic your withdrawal, the more profound its impact. When you detach not from spite, but from self-awareness, when you stop giving to prove and start protecting your peace, you align yourself with that universal law. Suddenly, you're not chasing, explaining, or begging. You're simply being, and in that stillness, in that sovereignty, your absence begins to teach. It becomes the mirror they never looked into, the voice they never listened to, the love they never held carefully enough. Over time, people begin to remember, often too late, the energy that once surrounded them. They remember the way you listened, the way you made them feel safe, the way your presence brought a kind of warmth that is not easily replicated. They search for it in others and come up empty, and that, more than anything you could ever say, teaches them the price of ignoring you. So if he ignored you, let him. Let him sit in the silence he created. Let him search in others what he once had and dismissed. But you must rise, not in anger, not in pain, but in quiet power. You don't teach him through revenge, words, or emotional chaos. You teach him by disappearing from where you are no longer respected, and by reappearing in your own life fully, completely, without apology, because the greatest lesson he will ever learn is not from what you say, but from what you stop giving. When your presence was once a privilege, your absence becomes the proof, and in that stillness, in that space, he will come to realize the price of ignoring you was losing something he may never find again.